flood of 1913, you know, we've seen the maps as far as how far the water went. It did not get to the top of this hill, but it did get up here. About up here on the corner, the maps show that there was water all the way up through here. But as you can imagine, you know, you're starting to go uphill right here. It wouldn't have reached the top of that hill to that house at that location, but almost. I'm sure it almost got to there. And our route is going to be down this way and around the corner. We're going to cross the bridge over here. So we'll start talking more about the flood once we get closer to the river. So the 1913 flood, the waters. Now you're going to see signs around here like this. And this sign will tell you how high the water was at that particular location. And the water, now it would have come up past here. There was a house right here where that laundromat was. The Smith family lived there. 4 people died from that family, 4 out of the 5. The father survived it, but the rest of the family died. He was a shoemaker, and that and one other family that had 6 people die were the 2 biggest family tragedies in that sense. There were 18 people that died during the flood. There were around 150 homes that were totally destroyed, pretty much destroyed anyway, and many of those entirely swept off their foundations. Here's one. There was a man by the name of Bob Eichhorn, and I think that he lived in that corner house right there. Bob Eichhorn did a lot of writing in the community, a lot of programs, and I can remember him even telling this one about during the flood of 1913. He said he was a junior in high school, and he said he was in a play practice for the high school play. Now, the high school was where Willis School is down here today, the back part of it at that time. So it was facing Winter Street. They had no auditorium, so they practiced at the old City Hall, where they had an auditorium there on the 2nd floor of the old City Hall, down right where the City Hall is now. He said we were in there practicing that night, and the flood, he said the rains, it was just pouring down rain. And he said that evening, he said now the auditorium's on the 2nd floor, and it had a tin roof. Have you ever been under a tin roof when it's raining? You know, it just is thunderous under there, and it was really raining hard. It was raining so loud that they could not hear a thing. And so the director, he said, shouted to them, you know, we're going to call it off. Nobody can hear anybody. We'll meet tomorrow afternoon after school. So they called off practice, and he went home. Came down Sandusky Street, turned down here onto Winter, crossed the bridge, and it was dark. In 1913, there weren't a whole lot of lights. And crossing that bridge. Now the bridge now, you know, it has an arch on it. It goes up. It did not go up at all at that. At this lowest point right here, it would have gone straight across. So you are a lot closer to the water when you cross that bridge. And at night, he did not know how high the water was. He did not realize how close that water already was to the bridge when he crossed it. That night, then he goes home, and in the morning, he wakes up to his brother making a lot of noise. And he said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm getting the boat out of the basement. He said, why? He said, didn't you look outside? He looks out, and what he's looking at is no longer a river out here. It's like a lake, stretching all the way across. And there was no bridge. The bridge was gone. And this flood was caused by the fact that there had been heavy rains in January, February, all through February, and the ground was absolutely saturated. There was just no place for water to go. In fact, I found an article in the Delaware Gazette in late February, and the short article said, the river has flooded, it's over its banks, but it's not going to cause you to have to leave your homes. We think it's about over, you can go back. You will not need to leave your homes. That's late February. March 25th, the night of the 24th, was after all this rain, and it already happened all this time. Now heavy rains again. No dam up north of Delaware on the Olentangy. And this caused the rivers to explode over the banks that night. Not just here, but all over Ohio. This was the worst natural disaster in the history of Ohio. So all your cities and towns that were located on streams were having the problems. And so that night, when it went over the banks, at 4:30 in the morning, this was the first bridge to go out. By 7:30 in the morning, the next bridge up here, the Central Avenue Bridge, went out. By 10:30 in the morning, the William Street Bridge went out. And then the big railroad bridge went out. And you think, wow, that walking path above that real high. Got to there, kids will ask me, I said, no, it didn't get up to there. But buildings were washing downstream. And one of them hit the abutments to that big bridge, shaking it just enough that the center span fell. And people, in fact, knowing that they were safe watching the flood, went up on top of that bridge to watch it, knowing they were safe. Well, they were until that building shook it and knocked it down, and there were several people, 3 people died, drowned from that. Some were rescued, but 3 of them did not survive on that tin bridge. They called it the Tin Railroad Bridge, and it went down. Well, let's go on up here farther and talk more about it. And you think that this William Street Bridge went out, and then the last one was the big bridge up there, the high one. That's the one that the center span is out. Most of the bridges in the county went down. 40-some bridges went down during the flood. And many covered bridges went down in the county at that time also. And so the Scioto River, the Alum Creek, Big Walnut, all of those streams were affected by it. But
what was construction?
well, here's the thing about the bridges too. This town began in 1808. By 1828, they had a bridge here across William Street. The founder of the community lived right over here and wanted it, of course, convenient for him, too. And so he had a log bridge put across right here. And by 1832, that bridge went out with the flood. So it only lasted for 4 years. So they built another bridge. It lasts until 1836. And that bridge goes out. At which point, before they built another bridge, the people were now starting to move a little farther north, and they were thinking, we need a bridge across what they called North Street, which is Central Avenue right here. And they said, we want a bridge there too, so if you're going to build one down there, build one up here, which they did. So by 1840, they had a bridge there, and by 1846, that bridge went out, knocking down that bridge also as it went downstream. So they build, now they end up rebuilding those, and they build a Winter Street Bridge. All 3 of them go out in the flood. Floods were constant. One of the big problems with floods were that during the early history of the community and the county, you know, Ohio was forested with all these trees. And so this was just a wooded county, as were other counties. And so as they cut down the trees to get rid of them, they got them down close to the riverbank and let them float on downstream. And of course, they did. And they hit the bridges and they knocked them out. And so they were having problems with that. Log construction, then wood construction, and then finally they did get into the iron construction. So those were problems. Finally, by the 1880s, they had 3 bridges across here. One of them was a covered bridge across William Street. And it didn't go down with the flood. It went down with too many cattle that tried to cross at one time, and it sagged. It sagged enough in the middle that they had to rebuild it. But by the late 1880s, they had bridges across all 3 that lasted up until the 1913 flood. And that's also the last time a bridge went out, of course, in this city. Okay, move on here. That bridge I mentioned, the wreckage of it. During the flood, a lot of people were killed. 18, as I said, here in Delaware. On this side of the river over here, when you're at Mingo Park and you look back across the river, you can still see back over there the old chair factory, the Delaware Chair Company. And it was several buildings. Now, the biggest one of them is still standing. I think 2 of them maybe are still standing back there. But a smaller one of those buildings had broken away. Before that, though, the bridge was already down. 2 brothers, were riding the top of a roof that was floating downstream, and knowing that they were really in danger of dying, and they thought they probably would go under, but they were trying to hang on to the top of this roof, but they hit that wreckage that you just looked at of that bridge, and it stopped it there. And so at least for a time, they couldn't get out to the bridge, but at least for a time, they felt we're safe here, at least for now. But then one of the chair factory buildings breaks away, floats down, and hits that roof, knocking it out into the stream again, and in fact throwing them off into the water. And they are now struggling to get to a pole, like a wooden pole, a light pole, I guess. They're climbing up it. Now those light poles had those metal things that you could climb, and they were climbing up it, and they were hanging on to it. Problem with the pole was the wires were still attached, and they had been taken down by the bridge, and so the wires were stretched to that bridge wreckage, and it was shifting a little bit and causing the pole and the wires to pull down towards the bridge, and the pole is now going down, 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 closer to the water, and they're trying to hold on to this pole, and all of a sudden the wires snap, and they said that pole that they were holding on, it was like a slingshot. It shot back up straight, throwing them way out into the water. And now they're back in the water struggling again. First of the brothers gets to the wreckage of the bridge and there's just a little bit of it up above the water. Not much, but a little bit of it. And a sort of a curved part of metal there. And he managed to get up there, and there was another flat, about that wide, piece of metal from the bridge there, and he got up on that, and his brother was coming behind, and he reached out, and he could almost grab his brother, but he could not get to him. And the last thing the brother said as he went on by was, "Goodbye, Bill," and went down under the water and drowned. That man ended up on that metal part of the bridge in this pouring rain. Now it's still raining, and he's stuck on that for like 48 hours, almost 50 hours on that bridge, and of course he is already soaking wet. It's a cold day. It's a cold rain these 2 or 3 days, and he is trying to at least stay under the curve. It's right above his head a little bit to break the rain. And he also walks maybe as far as from here to that cement wall on what space he has, just to keep circulation going. But he's finally rescued, and they do save that man. It was They're right up here in the middle of the river here. Okay, go ahead on down.
My sister remembers him telling her about coming in after the flood, he and his brothers,
Okay.
coming in and helping rescue.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you'd been around 17. You'd been,
Yeah, he'd have been,
yeah.
you know, high school age. And
Yep.
he had several brothers, and they came in, and she said that they helped pull the. There was a. Didn't they create a basket
Yes, they did.
thing to pull people
Yes,
over
they
back
did.
and forth? And he evidently came and they were helping with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And that building, the livery, what's that say? Livery,
Ed.
yeah, stable,
Feed or seed?
yeah, maybe feed or probably feed.
Oh, feed sale.
Yes. It would have stood probably right about where the fire hydrant is, or maybe even as far back as where the drive enters right there. Is where that building was. Let's see here. I'm trying to picture again here. Maybe. Yeah, probably about here where the fire hydrant is, I would imagine. And anyway, there's somebody up there on top waiting to be rescued. Now this next one on the next page. You see,
There they
up
are.
there, yep.
That's the second floor. I mean, that's the first floor.
The next one is of the same, next page is the same.
Look at all those people.
Yes.
Yeah, it says feed.
Uh-huh. And that means that a livery stable is a place where you take your horse and leave it for the day, and they take care of it. You know, since if you had business downtown, or if you worked downtown and you didn't live downtown, and you needed your horse, you couldn't. It's okay if you're just going in for a short time to a store, but you needed a place to leave your horse for hours. You take it to the livery stable and leave it, and pay a rent. It's just like putting it in a car in a car garage. But so that was there. Now, up here, as you can imagine, now the flood water, your ground's raising up here, so it did not reach to the top of the hill. The water didn't get up that high, but it certainly got into the area where we are now. And it wouldn't have been as deep as it would have, you know, because again, you're coming uphill. But this next picture. This picture is taken from a building that used to be right here where this one is. Where this first one is. It was taken from the top of that, looking back to the crowd. The crowd is back there on that corner. The water can't get to them. But there's people gathered at the top of that hill, and they're quite interested in what's going on down here, because you just saw the picture with all the people on top of the building. Well, several of these buildings had people on them that they're trying to get to. And so this picture here, the next one,
Is that right here at the corner?
it would be this,
PNC
where
right
the
here?
bank
Okay.
is, right, where that
Okay.
bank is now.
Okay.
The next one, let's see here now.
Can we hold the sign?
Yeah, thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right.
Yeah, there we go. This one is taken from up above. Now, how far, where is it? You see that tower, the little one that sticks up on the corner right there? They got up on the top of that, and they took a right over here, on this side right here. They were on the top of that.
Step out this way.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
See the little
oh yeah.
They climbed up on that and took the picture looking back to the buildings that are along here. And so looking, you can see the people down below looking. Now, look at this over here on this side. These men here are holding a rope. And there is a boat out here. That rope is attached to the boat. And these people are trying to keep control of that boat so it can get out here and rescue the people on the tops of those buildings. Some of them they got to, but the livery stable one, they did not get to. And those people went down. Now some of them survived, but at least a couple of them drowned there from that building they were standing on top of. This view here, the next picture, is when you get to the corner and you're looking that direction. You're looking up Union Street. Look at all that water. Now actually, I think this was probably taken from the next corner looking north.
Central.
Yes, because the water wouldn't have been up here to the top of this hill right now. Probably at the next corner looking...
A little lower point.
Right, that's lower ground down there. And I think that was probably a little farther down. But that building, by the way, the one with the tower, there you see the front of that building, and it was the YMCA in Delaware. Delaware had a YMCA before the one that's out there west of town now. And people in the YMCA back then, and in that building, not only could you go there for recreation, you could rent rooms in there and live there. And so they turned those rooms, and the YMCA became the relief headquarters. It's up on higher ground, it's not affected by the flood, and that became the center for helping people after the flood. Take a look at this one. See that?
That's the top up there.
Wait, were that satellite dishes?
Up high,
No, all the way
up
high.
there.
That tower.
That little thing right there is this, right here in that picture. And it's the person who's looking back down after the flood at all the wreckage.
Are those train cars down
Yes,
there?
you see, there's a train track over on the other side of town, but at that time, there was also a train track right along this side of the river. And there was a train station about halfway down here in this block, right along the riverbank. And that train station and train track was what all these train cars were from. And so that's the wreckage from it. But because of the slope of the ground and because of the creek down here and just the natural slope, water was past. Let me see, I don't know if we have a picture of it or not. I don't think I do here. But there was there was water down at the end down there caused from coming back up in this direction. With the creek and the run. And so it did stretch a little ways past, we have a picture of it past, called the Andrews house right there on the corner. And, but it didn't, but then the road rises up a little bit there and it's not too far down there, and not too far up here. Now the water here as we go downhill, well, we're going to see another sign down here to how high it was. In fact, let's see on this side. We're going up a little ways up here, but it wouldn't have made it up to the point. Over here on another sign on the corner here, a sign here on the Mean Bean, a sign over there on the Mottos. Of course, the water kept getting deeper all the way down to the bottom of the hill as the Delaware Run in particular was the deepest area of water in the downtown. We'll go down past that. There are pictures of boats. Well, right here we are. Here we are. Let's see here. I'll get the right one. Yeah. This picture here, Sandusky Street and the City Hall. Now you are standing. You're standing on that side, looking back at that angle. And on the corner is the old City Hall. And there's the Mean Bean, or what would have been the Mean Bean. with the peaked roof there. And you can see a boat out here in the street somewhere. Thought I saw a boat out here. Yeah, right there by the city hall, there's a boat out there. And we put one over here on this side, on the Crossroads Music. They have one.
Yeah.
They have one on Amato's Pizza right here on the. There's another sign right here. Because of the creek, we're going to cross right over here. But so the water through here, the man who had our who we videoed 25 years ago, along with that other number of people. If any of you were at that program the other night, we interviewed the 75th anniversary, around 10 people that we could find who still remembered the flood. And the oldest of the men was in his 90s and spoke of working here at, there was a bookstore there in 1913 called Pardon and Gallant, which I think stood right next to where Clancy's is right here. I think that was Pardon and Gallant. And anyway, said he worked there, and they said it came up to almost 7 feet inside of that building there. His other memory of the flood, this man said, I won't forget, he mentioned that that when the Tin Bridge went out, one of the people who fell off of it managed to get to a tree and was hanging in this tree, was up on a branch of the tree, calling for somebody to rescue him. And he said, we could see him. He said, I went down there and we watched and we saw him down there, and he was there for hours up this tree. And he said the memory that he had in his 90s, he said, I could still hear his voice. He said, and they did get to him. They were able to rescue that man. But he said he was there for so long. And, but he said, I still hear his voice out there in that tree. Go around the corner this way. Let's see here. Now, you're standing right out in the middle of the street, right up here. And there's the waters. You're looking back this way now.
Okay.
So there's your old City Hall tower.
Yeah.
This is this building right here. So we're just past there looking up Sandusky Street. You can see how high it is over here on the street, how the waters of
It's almost up to that sign.
Yes, it is.
That sign would have at least been.
This hall is in your hall?
No, this was called the Garment Factory. And the garment, and which everybody in town just called the Underwear Factory. And they made underwear, made other items in there, but they, of course you can imagine that now they made it up above in the higher levels, but the sale room was on the first floor. And they said that the water came up to the top shelf in there, so it really ruined everything. So they grabbed it all out, and they put 20,000 yards of cloth and underwear that spread out all over that campus. We do have I don't have it here today, but we do have a picture back there of all that underwear. Oh yeah, it is. There it is. There we go.
It's the one you've got in
I don't
your
have it here
hand.
today. I've turned to it even, you know. There we go.
Wow.
It's all material and underwear that they
there's
stretched
Great
on
Chapel.
that hill up
Why
there.
do they stretch it on that
Right?
hill?
Yeah.
Dry it.
It was dry there.
Yep.
There's Great Chapel. See Great Chapel?
I've been in the top of that.
Have you been at the top of Great Chapel? I've never done that.
I've been in a lot of these buildings. My dad works
At
in
least
this-
two of the people we interviewed
My
that
grandma
night,
used to work
25 years ago, two of the women said that their mothers had taken them down here after it dried out, or at least somewhat dried out. They had sales on to try to sell them, and they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they could still picture the smell of cotton. And they said they co clothing. They said it was just a terrible stench of that inside there. Let's see here, our next picture, I don't know if we're doing this yet or not. Well, this is sort of hard to picture, but you're on the brick sidewalk over on the other side of the creek, looking all the way down the valley to St. Mary back here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's the run.
There's the creek, yeah. It's not a real clear picture, but that's how high that
water was that.
Mhm.
So Michael Avenue and all that was probably
Oh my
flooded
gosh,
pretty
yes.
badly.
Yep, we'll be talking about that when we get down there. But, yeah, let's cross. Face this way. There's like a 4-room maybe school and has a little tower. Face this street right here. These two homes were here during the flood of 1915. In fact, 1912 there was a tornado that hit Delaware. Tore the roof off the St. Mary's school that was there. Set a beam right through the center of this house onto the kitchen table, right before, or right in the dining room table, right as they were ready to sit down to eat. And the food was out, but they weren't sitting there yet. And so much for that. I think they ate with the neighbor next door. But then 13 is when the flood hit. You'd asked me earlier about people who were stuck in the homes or in the homes about the families. As the lady who lived in this house told us in the video that we videoed her 25 years ago. She was up in years at that time. She said she was a first grader at St. Mary's School. And she said the family was in here. Their names were Griffith. And she said, my father was stubborn and did not leave, despite the warnings. And he said, and as she mentioned in that video, she said all the families who went down with the flood or who were stuck close to those, they had all the chances to get out, but they ignored the warnings, you know. And the father, she particularly blamed it on the men of the family, you know, who made the decision back then, you know, that they're not leaving. So my father went downtown to see what was going on, and by the time he got back, he had to wade through water to get into the house. She said, my mother had cooked some bread, baked some bread and something else, and they went upstairs into this house to wait out the flood. And figuring, well, they've been through floods before, it's not going to get that high. But it did, and it got up, she said, just within just an inch or two of the second floor. So the piano that they had kept bouncing. It had risen with the flood. It was bouncing against their floor upstairs, in other words, the ceiling. She thought, well, that's going to break through and we're going to go down. But it didn't. And she said that although she got to see things like she saw the books and the chairs floating out of St. Mary's, where she'd gone to school there, and then she said, my father, though, was really the eyes of the family as he looked out the back window and out this window from upstairs to what's going on. And he watched as the neighbors down around the corner, about where you turn on Route 23 there, was where the Melching family lived. And the Melchings, there were 8 members of the family, and 6 of them drowned in the flood. He watched as the house broke away, and he said their house is going. And he could hear them screaming, and of how they had little kids. Of course, said they were our playmates, they were our friends. And she said that the father, because two girls did survive it, parents before the kids did not. And one of the two who survived it said that my father was trying to hold the baby up above the water. It was up, you know, in the house, closer to the river, down a little lower, up to it was just about over his chin, and he was trying to hold the baby up. And the mother was on the bed trying to hold one of the kids up, but it broke away, and 6 of them drowned. They thought that they were going to drown probably too. They thought their house could not last too long. Particularly when the father leaned out of this window and looked up the street about where the library is, and in the lumber yard. It was a big building, and had broken away from its foundation. And he said, "Oh, the lumber yard is broken away, it's coming toward us." And they knew they were gone. But on the corner where the street, the school sign with the kids on it there, over here on this side, there was a tree, and in fact, there was a row of maple trees all the way down here between the sidewalk and the street right here. There was a whole row of them. It rocked a little. So if it rocked that way, we were gone. But if it came this way, maybe those trees would block the lumber yard, which they did, and it did not hit their house. There was a big tree, she said, and I remember when the tree was there, when they put in this path right here, there was a tree in this front yard until they put this path in a few years ago. And the rubble from the flood had gone up high enough that it was almost to the second floor window up there. So eventually they brought a boat to try to rescue them from Merrick Hall back here, the one with the two towers right there, up high on the hill. They brought a boat across to try to get to them. When they got there, she said, "My father sat on the windowsill, the second floor, with 1 foot inside and 1 foot outside, and he was afraid of us stepping onto the rubble for fear it may not hold us. So as we stepped out, because they put the kids in first, they knew it was going to take more than one trip. And he said, 'Step on my foot,' he said to me, 'step on my foot, and then step into the boat.' The boat was up close. And they did, they got them on, and when they started back, and she said, imagining this, she said it was like a lake. She said, stretching all the way back through here. She said some areas there was a lot of current. Other areas, she said it was just as smooth as though there was nothing. It was like a lake. But she said, we got down a little ways and to try to get across here, and it got caught in the current, the boat did. And the one who brought the boat was struggling, trying to keep it under control. And later this girl said, my mother had said at the time he was back in the house, that they're gone. They're gone. You can't control it. But he hit a pole. Not one of these that's there now, but about in the same area. He hit a pole, and it jolted it just enough to send it this way, and he got out of the current, and got him up to that hill. And then they came back for the others. Just rowboats, right. Now, had he just waited, he wouldn't have had to do that. We're asked about how long did that water sit on Sandusky Street. When later that morning, because this was on the 25th, rained all night, rained all day, waters kept rising and rising all through Monday until a building coming downstream hit the abutment of that high bridge up there, shaking it, knocking the center span down, and also shaking loose a lot of debris and that had gathered there. They said the big problem they felt with what made Delaware's flood so bad for years was that the sides of the bridge were too close to the riverbank to the point that they were trapping all this debris, and it was acting like a dam. They only had a narrow channel for the water to go through. They said once that broke loose, the water immediately started to go down. And they said by the end of the day, said there wasn't a problem in this area. And,
that quick?
Yeah, that quick. That they said it went down, even though the rain continued on for 2 more days. So it rained all the way through Thursday, but that much water was able to escape, and it washed out more of the debris. And then once you got more coming out, then you had a stronger current there, washing out the rest of the debris.
But then all that water hit.
Oh, then it went further south.
Hit Columbus.
True. That's true. Yep, that's true. So there was a church also on this corner, and that's this church right here. The other thing that they felt probably saved their house was that look at all this debris out here in front, all this that's piled up there. They felt that the church, which stayed through the flood, probably blocked debris that might have taken out their house. So that probably helped them also. It was on that corner right here, on this side, right where the brick building is. No, on this side, right here where the truck is, right here.
Oh,
There's another view of it. There's another view of it, but you're on that side, looking back at it. And there's St. Mary Church, you can see in the background behind it there. Yeah, and like if all this debris had not hit the church, it might well have hit this house. The only time it went above those steps was right there, and flowed through the church. There is a basement, but an unfinished basement here in St. Mary. There's a picture that I have, I think. Maybe I've already passed that one and didn't. I think maybe I skipped it so that I can come back. So you're on that corner up there, looking back this way. And the water didn't get to the top of that hill on the corner. So we would have a picture back at the museum of people peeking around the corner of that building, looking back here towards the river. So you get an idea how high the water went to there. It did, I think, though, I think it went over, well, you can pretty well guess, just from this right here. It probably went down all the way to Sandusky Street, at least a little bit. Here, I think it went over the crest of the hill here, but not over the crest of the hill of that house right there, or the Ceremorial. And you can see St. Mary and their steps. There are no steps. The water is above the steps.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So that would have been
Right? Yeah, right. See how that is right there?
That must have been a top of
And there was a little fence around that building down in the corner at that time.
So high, you can see it.
Yeah.
That was the one that got washed out, and so that was the last. At 11:30 on the 25th, when that bridge went out, that was the last communication between two sides of the river. No way to get across. The very first thing they did, who was it just said that? Was there a
Basket,
Yeah,
Jennifer,
my grandfather.
Your grandfather.
your grandfather?
Yeah, he held the baskets.
Help with the basket. They had a pulling. Oh, we have a picture here, I think, there. There you are.
Well, that's the Tin Bridge, right?
Yeah, the Tin Bridge when it went out.
Oh, they put the baskets up top, though.
There's some others. I did see pictures you had at your show at Willis the other night about baskets you can pull across the river.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, in my mind, I can picture that still.
There it is. There's the basket.
Oh, that's the Tin Bridge, right?
And the Tin Bridge,
Oh,
and there's somebody in the basket that they're pulling across. That's the
There's a
first
person in there.
Yes.
oh.
First person to get across the river. This would be the railroad bridge. It was right about where or railroad track. This is right about where we are now. And that's where this is located.
Well, it's pretty risky. If it flooded as much as it did to put a railroad track down here.
I know, that's true. And so,
As often as it did
Where
flood,
was
they
the
have a
bridge?
track out.
You said the other night you talked about a bridge that the guy parked pool cars.
yes,
Full
there
pool
was
cars.
one bridge that survived it close to town here. That was down south farther, about there where you cross the river, down there where the treatment plant is, and about where you turn across the bridge right down there that's there now.
Yeah.
There was a railroad bridge there. It was for this railroad. And it would have crossed over way down there. And somebody got smart enough, was able to pull a train out across it to keep the weight down so that would not, the water would not be washed out. And that saved it. Columbus did some of that too, to save some of their bridges. But
Oh, that's thick.
yeah, it was. Yes. Problem with that one, it's far enough down and it's sort of remote. There wasn't an easy way to get to it, so it really wasn't practical for people here to get down and across that. And so what they did after putting the cable across, then they finally built a footbridge across here. Well, here shows it. Yeah. There shows your footbridge. There's William Street right there, and you're on the other side of the river looking back here. There's the footbridge. That was the bridge that was over the river.
Temporary, huh? They get people moving.
And there's St. Mary.
Amazing.
There's the water tank for the railroad. If you had steam locomotives, they needed a water tank. So, and the Melching family would have been right about in there, is where their house would have stood. There's St. Mary's School, the original one back here in the back.
I don't know that I'd ever seen pictures of that until I saw it the other night.
Okay, and this was the lady's house from behind that survived the flood that we talked about. And let's see here. I have another view here, I think, of this. Yeah, the last one there. Oh, I think I did show that briefly with the tower there. Looking back across the river and the railroad cars around. And, there was a, you know, when they first put the footbridge across and then secured it better, then they allowed people to cross on this more secure footbridge, but even there, no horses, no carts were allowed to cross it. Only on foot could you cross it. And if you were carrying anything, you had to walk 10 paces behind anybody else. It had to be spread that weight out. And yet they said there were like 100,000 people that crossed that before they finally had a better bridge. For quite a while, without any way to do, before they even got the footbridge built, there was a family by the name of O'Brien, who at that time lived east of town, about 2 miles, and they were a member of St. Mary Church. And this lady, an elderly lady, died of natural causes in the house, and of course the family wanted to hold the funeral in St. Mary, but they couldn't, because I mean there's no way to get to it. So the railroad out east of town, way out east, they put the body on that railroad to Columbus. Then they put it on a railroad coming back out on West William Street, which is where it is now, to the Hocking Valley, they call it. Brought her back that way, and then held the funeral at St. Mary.
Amazing. Wow.
I'll end it with this. Because with all the tragedy and all the people who died, and all the destruction and everything, and of course the town was just devastated by all this. And but I mentioned about that ice house, the City Ice and Fuel Company, they call it, City Ice Company, up the street, and it was close to the river, but it was a solid brick building. It did not go down, of course. But ice was so important 100 years ago. Without refrigeration, you needed blocks of ice like every day in the summer. And so the Iceman would bring it around in a cart pulled by a horse, and he was a popular person. You know, everybody needed to have the Iceman stop back. He followed his regular route, and kids loved the Iceman too, because on a hot summer day, when the Iceman came down your street, when he came down the street, you would run to the Iceman, and a real treat was for him to chip off chips of ice and give it to you. And the kids loved that, and they loved the horse. Well, the horse was kept in the building where the ice was, and where the cart was. They were unable to get the horse out. They could not get the horse out of the building in time, and had to survive the flood. Of course, being close to the river, it was up too high. And so when the water went down and he went back, when they opened up the door, we did not find the horse. We thought, well, but the doors were closed. The horse could not have got out. Then he heard something up above. There were stair steps going up into the haymow. And the horse was smart enough to climb up those steps and get into the haymow, where it was perfectly content.
Oh yeah.
Heat rises, it was nice and warm, it's dry, food, I don't have to do any work. It was probably sad the flood was over. But the horse survived, and of course the problem, I don't know how they managed to get that horse down.
Yeah.
Because horses and cows don't mind going up. They don't like to walk down, something like that. I don't know how they got him down. But the horse survived it. And they said with all of this destruction and all the death of people, they said the town, hundreds of people came down to see that horse. Think the horse had survived the flood. Well, that's pretty well it. And we'll walk on back.
Okay.